Welcome to the Black Science Podcraft. This is a cross between a podcast and a presentation where you'll have one speaker delivering a concept, a theory, an idea to the other. So the goal is to allow you to critically analyse these points and to see if they hold any weight. So why black science? So there's a few reasons behind the term black science. Stay tuned to find out.
I agree about the power dynamic that is associated with race, definitely. I don't think that white people can say that black people or other races are racist towards them because of that power dynamic. I think that reverse racism thing is not at all applicable. I think it's something that's been made up recently to justify other people feeling uncomfortable with how they get certain privileges, maybe I might use that word in there, maybe. And yeah, I think that the whole race discussion is really interesting, and it's very vast because there are lots of different ways that people do view it. And actually what we're doing here right now is breaking it down. We're looking at each part of it so that people can then also get a fairer understanding, maybe a broader understanding of I don't know the words to use, how we just get lost in it and not really view it properly. Am I making sense?
Yeah, I think when we begin the discussion with the power of the written word, or the power of stories and the power of narrative, like it underlays why race as a social construct is so powerful, because these are ultimately stories that are told by figures or apparent figures of authority in any given culture that we see, maybe wrongfully so, these players in the design of what we call a social racial construct, but these are all actually just stories that are told and woven into kind of public consciousness that is accepted. And I think the power of narrative, again, that the perception of what racism is, it's a power dynamic, and it can't be done on an individual basis, and unless it kind of impact negatively and so we talk about fear, discrimination, prejudices as opposed to racism, because it's only people that come from a white powerful structure or a European power structure that can kind of exist in that place of privilege. And I just think it's interesting when you look at that privilege, how they may view discrimination and prejudice towards them for whatever reason, which is justified,
and place it in the same category.
Put it in the same category of racism.
And it's not
that's
that
wild.
So
and you see, the ability to do that is the power I'm talking about. It's only because they're the people. Because, all right, look, I don't really like talking on this topic at all because it's fire. We all kind of know
exactly.
it's a bit but if we look at anti-Semitism, right, and this same type of reality in that realm of discrimination, right, and prejudice, whatever you want to call it, you can see the power with who defines it and who gets to describe what it is and accept it as globally squarely lies within a particular group. You can't chat to it.
And it depends how much
you can't chat to it. You can't debate it. You can't. So this is the point I'm making. You can't chat to it. And people know they will lose their jobs. They will lose their life. Everyone is well aware.
It is the power thing.
So this is what I'm saying is the power, right? In our realm, when we're talking about anti-black racism, we don't have that power. So everyone's got a view on how we are allowed to define racism, and everyone's view is seen as equal. We can be told quite barely, no, that's not racism. This is racism. I remember one time there was a guy who used to work who was a trainer who was telling me, I know you're pro-black and all that, but that's not how you do it. He's just a white guy, bro. Just to run it. He's telling me how I am supposed to be pro-black. He thought the way I am doing it isn't correct. He's telling me. Are you hearing what I'm saying, though? A random white guy is telling me how I'm supposed to be pro-black. The way I'm doing it is not the right way.
Perception.
But what I'm getting at is the power reality that I'm trying to describe here is, if I was a Jewish person talking about anti-Semitism, no one's going to tell me that that's not how you how you be pro-Jew or pro-Asian. You know, no, you're not even allowed to. And even if you feel it, most people feel like they just can't say something about that. So the power here isn't even in the discrimination. The power is in being able to define the discrimination and who has the right to define the discrimination. And this is the real power behind it all. So our inability to decide what racism is, and having to go on these shows, you see it, GMTV and all these people debating on whether this incident was racist or it wasn't racist. Right now, there's a case going on in America, right, where there was a black kid who was punched, stepped to by two white American kids, right, in a county. They have that no stand down law. What's that law? They got that no stand down where you don't have to stand down, stand your ground, or they're allowed they're allowed to put someone down if they feel a threat of their life, right?
Yeah.
And then they're basically, obviously, this really separated them. The white population really saying this. So this guy ended up stabbing and killing this guy. Just punched him in the face. The guy's punched him in the face. Two white boys have approached him. He's went into a tent or something like that. Something like that. I can't remember. He's gone into something. They've tried him to get away, and he's like, well, right. But in the end, they've ended up punching him. He's now pulling a knife and stabbing him. He's died. So it's really divided America, right, over this thing. All the black people are in support of the black kid. They've all raising money for him, and where they're saying he's been arrested, that he's awaiting trial.
Yeah.
And all the white people saying, bruv, savage, what do you mean? Savage, how could he do that? Yeah, you're gonna kill someone because he punched you in the face. But do you remember that case when the guy chased down the boy with the hoodie? I can't remember his name, right? Because he chased him, right? He chased him and shot him, the kid, right? He followed him, right, and made this happen, right? And it turned out to be a 14-year-old kid. The white population was really in protection of, you know what I mean? And like, and to be fair, as much as black people knew it was racist, they wasn't like, oh man, I can't believe. Right now, if you study the media in America, it's like, I can't believe people are supporting this murderer, all this type of thing. Like, you lot are evil. I can't believe you're supporting this murderer. Da 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 da. But when that case happened, that energy didn't exist. It wasn't the same outrage, right? And where you got someone shooting, and this guy actually punched him. Two guys have approached him. Two full-grown adults, big kids, right? But you know, they're the same size at least, right? Actually physically assaulted him and all sorts. Now, I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm not saying either. What I'm saying is the different energy in that same situation, where one bloody weapon, gun, firearm used on a child who was leaving, who was going away. You chased him, you followed him because he's a threat to you. Make it make sense.
You mentioned something interesting earlier when you gave the Jews or the kind of anti-Semitism as a kind of ideology that's kind of more deeply embedded in kind of wider society, and it
can't define
what's interesting is that in that when you made a comment about it, you said that we don't have power, and I think it's how power is viewed, because actually arguably black people as a culture have soft power in the way of influence, just in one sense. So when we speak about how power is wielded, there's nothing more powerful now, probably is more powerful, but than the soft power of influence. Now black people have that. Now we might have that in poor cultural norms or negative cultural norms, but we have that in terms of culture. But it's interesting because you say we don't have the power. Then on a secondary level, we have the power in our own homeland in terms of resources. We just don't have the power of strength of mind, the power of anti-colonial. Like as a what I'm saying is that it's interesting when we say we don't have the power, and actually, logically, we've got more than that, more than enough influence, more than enough resource at our home. What we don't have is an understanding that these racial constructs are what we accept. So even saying to ourselves we don't have the power, when actually we can see the power that's exerted through influence globally through different means, even if it's a negative influence. And then we can see that corrupt leaders back home on the continent don't utilize their power of resource and people effectively. So we do have power. What we don't have is we have a lack of accepting the right stories about ourselves in the way we hold that power.
All right, so what I would say, firstly, that power that you talk about, that influence, I think this is something that we like to overstate. Bloody hell, I think this is something we like to overstate. You know, I honestly think it doesn't. It's okay. I think it doesn't exist in the way we think it exists. It doesn't exist in the way we think it exists, because all of this influence is through the media that is given to us by somebody else's structure. So all of these people that have this influence that is given to them by somebody who really has the power for them to have that influence.
It's that they have so that you might say that their strings is like their strings at the end of puppet masters is I guess the point. What I'm saying is that influence is a soft power in itself. So it's a lack of understanding that those people that may be helping you direct whatever narrative that you've been told to, actually you still wield a power. Again, it comes down to how you perceive yourself. So the idea that actually people that have come into wealth or come into kind of celebrity light or celebrity attention only have power because they're given power by the media industries that behind them. Actually, that power in itself is power that can be utilized, and I think it's the way we perceive power. So I'm not saying that
I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying.
I'm saying it's how we understand it, and it's not saying it's not as powerful as we think, but actually it is as powerful as we think. If we accept that anybody that comes into wealth or comes into kind of any type of stardom or has a lot of attention only has power because the money that they earn isn't a money that's backed by a national resource, which is what power should be. But
look, I understand what you're saying, but again, these infrastructures are designed to empower people that are going to work for these infrastructures. Now, this point I'm making links to the same reality with these African leaders that you're talking about. A lot of them, like, this is why you only have these 3 guys in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, because the other guys know that going the other way, going the other way means you're gone, right? So again, it's allowed, right? Because again, these people that you're talking about with the celebrities and all of this stuff, they are picked because you're going to work with us a certain way. They're allowed to be successful because you're going to work with us a certain way. To a degree, what I'm saying, you're right, they could just go left and do what they want to do. They have that choice, right? But they only have that position they got now because they've been given a platform. Our problem is we don't recognize the infrastructures that all of this wealth is being created on is not ours. We're not paying attention to that fact. We like to say our influence is so big and broad. We have so much influence. Look how we influence them. We influence them. Yeah, but who am I? I'm nobody.
Okay,
this is what I mean. This is my point. I don't have that power that we're talking about. And I don't agree with him. Andrew Tate says something on this note, and like, you're free to do what you want until you're on a certain level. Once you're on a certain level, you do certain things. It's not going to work so well. Now, do you know what I mean? I don't agree with a lot of stuff he says, but that's just a simple truth. We call that knowledge, right? So people on that level understand that their wealth is attached to being a certain person and not doing certain things. But they know that because the infrastructure is not theirs.
But for them to be able to do those things, they saw the power of that person. That's why they normally bring them in to be under those structures.
Which is why we get the ludicrous nature of someone like Kanye that will wear like
they know the KKK power of the
mask
people.
and it's about the power of perception. So my point is, I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying. I'm just saying that the power that we say that we don't have, the power that
but you take that out of context.
The power we say we don't have, or the influence that I say is as a form of soft power. I didn't say that there's arguably how powerful soft power can be, but I'm saying we've got a huge amount of soft power that comes with the attention that's garnered by our celebrity people. Now, I'm saying that their wealth, their attention isn't manufactured all in every instance. So my point is how powerful we view these people, views on how powerful they view themselves in the world of this kind of white supremacy power structure. I'm saying that I wouldn't devalue the power of influence and the power of self-identifying, and I don't think I'm overestimating how powerful influence is, regardless of whatever you might say. If you're rich off of YouTube, that's a white person that owns that platform, or if you're rich online, it comes from a Google, it comes from an IP address that's owned by someone else. But that doesn't negate or devalue the power influence that's able to impact. So when I say power, your ability to impact change. I'm with you. And if you've got ability to impact change with your celebrity or your money, then you've got power. And I'm saying that we shouldn't devalue that power by saying it comes from a system.
That's not how I'm devaluing it. I'm saying that those people have a power that they know is capped in a certain way, and that is why it's even there. But that's not even, when you say I'm talking about we don't have the power, you taking it out of context. What I was talking about is the specific kind of power there. We as a people don't have the power to kill the argument of how to define racism against black people. Our arguments on what's racist is always debated. It's always debated. But we spoke about the Jewish community and anti-Semitic. That is not debatable. You're not even allowed to debate it publicly. You're not even allowed.
Well,
right?
if you do that,
have the discussion.
Serious legal.
So wait. So it's not even just the power. I'm just talking about that. We don't have to go further now. I'm talking about that is a clear cut. We don't have that power. We can't kill that argument. No matter who says how we define it from our side of things, that will be debated because we don't have the power to shut that conversation down or even define it. Yeah. They do. That's just a fact because we know that's whatever consequence, not consequence, whatever they do. The reality is we don't have that power.
What we don't have is we haven't invested our power in institutions that can leverage these things in reality because anything
it's not institutions. No, it is because it's a social power.
No, it's not because when you use the anti-Semitism as a good benchmark example, they've got institutions that they invest in that will make you legally. You have to hold legal consequences when you speak out. So when you speak out, it's not just a fear of I shouldn't. It's because these people have got the money, resource, and power to exact a consequence when you do step out of line.
I hear you,
and I agree that we don't have that power, or we've not exerted, or we've not invested in.
We don't. I know the one you're talking about.
We've not exerted our power in the right ways. They've exerted their power by building an institution.
Yeah, but I'm saying it's deeper than that. It's a social power because even amongst black people, we don't agree on what racism is. Many black people will take other people's definition of racism. Do you get what I'm saying? Yeah. But socially, just socially, in the Jewish community, even the minority that disagree with the version of anti-Semitism that exists now, you don't hear them. You don't even hear them, and they don't have nothing to lose really either.
Anti-Semitic society would be very clear. They would have very clear.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is, it's a social reality. Yeah. The narrative in our heads is so much different. Those are just manifestations of it, the structures and all of that. But the actual social reality of our opinions on these things are so conflated, and nobody will question that, and you can't help but question ours because there's no power related to it in any level. Socially, you can't. So why would it exist in any financial sector, structural, systemic? Why would it exist there? It doesn't exist on a social level, which is the foundation of all of this thing. Remember, foundationally, all of this is based on the story. So if we don't agree on the story, then how can you build a structure based on the story that we don't even agree on?
No, but I
can't. Anytime I find myself in an African-centered environment or a pro-black or race-first environment, there's always this consistent push for we need institutions. We need the buildings. Now, let me preference my next statement by saying, yes, that is important. We do need buildings. But the real institution is the community, is your mindset. That is the true institution because the building is just four walls. How you think within the building or creating the building or operating around the building is the real institution. The people are the institutions. That's why I get so confused when black people say things like, it's the system, it's the institutions, as if these illusional institutions are not being ran by a specific group of people. But nevertheless, we're not going to get on that right now. I'm saying for us, we must realize that our mindset, the way we move and operate with one another, is the most important institution. How we operate as family units is the most important institution. How we deal with each other in these job environments is the most important institution, not a building. The building, the institution, is just where you go to get indoctrinated, to get influenced, and to get socialized. This right now, what I'm doing is an institution. Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, those are institutions. We are the institution. Change your mindset. If you don't change your mindset, then we don't change our environment. We are the institution.
I think you're right. The point I'm arguing against is that us not having power isn't because we lack the power. Again,
when I say not having power, remember, I'm speaking of specific power, not in general. There's many kinds of power.
You just clarify.
That's why the Judaic that's why it's important to say that's why they're a good example, because they've invested in an institution that helps embed a very black and white. You say we don't agree on what racism like, and we can have different prejudices depending on what culture, part of the subculture we accept to. What I'm saying is it's set because they've invested in an institution that's been very clear about their definition of what this is.
I'd say it's the other way around. It was set, and then they invested this. The institution didn't set it. They set it, and then they made an institution.
Okay.
So you can look at like the Zionist movement. You can look at, but I'm saying that it's a very good example of actually the power that you wield is the power that you invest in terms of building institutions, and we lack power not just because of how we perceive power, but because we lack the foresight to invest in institutions that can protect whatever definition we want to agree to at that time, which gets amended. So if you look back on the anti-Semitic society's definition of race, I'm sure it's changed over the last 15, 20 years to meet the changing needs of society. But I'm saying that my point is that the power that we speak of with these institutions, with these kind of ghost in the shell, if you like, is about institutions, and institutions are built on certain premises, and those premises have been racist. So it's not about us lacking power, it's about us lacking how we accept these stories. And I think that's why I come back to how you started. It's the story we accept in ourselves that says we don't even have power, and we do have power.
Okay.
Which part are we on now? We're into our last hour.
So, critical race theory, aka CRT, is a good example of a group of black people defining racism in a way that suggests it's a systemic issue. CRT emerged out of a framework of legal analysis in the late 1970s and early 1980s, created by legal scholars Derek Bell, Kimberly Crenshaw, and Richard DeLango, among others. CRT recognizes that racism is more than the result of individual bias and prejudice. It's an academic and legal framework that denotes that systemic racism is part of American society, from education and housing to employment, healthcare, essentially all sectors. The simplest summary I could find is articulated in this clip. So
this is the
critical race theory acknowledges that race is one of the main structures in our society that fuels inequality. Critical race theory basically believes that racism is written into the system, and so the law isn't automatically something that is good. For example, it acknowledges that racism is not merely a byproduct of our system, but is actually written into the very fabric of it. One of the most important things is that critical race theory requires a power-conscious lens, and the only way to truly understand inequality and to end it is to look through every issue through that. One example is the relationship with the law. In the quote, "The law does not function as a social mediator of relations between all people. Instead, it is a tool that merely functions to protect the most privileged."
So, critical race theory, I'm going to use this as an example of a particular thing that narratives have been used to create particular perspectives on this whole subject of race, right? And there's the left side and the right side, for lack of a better term. So even though it's over 40 years old, in recent years, critical race theory has been criticized as problematic in the US. It's very old. People seem to think it's a new thing. It's not. Seen as woke politics and demonized as racist itself. Check out this video that shows that.
The critical race theorists, the one largely behind the anti-racist movement, have redefined the term racism beyond all recognition of most English speakers. Instead of referring to prejudice and discrimination based on race, the new definition is defined based on collective or group power dynamics. Kendi defines anti-racism as supporting any policy or idea that levels racial disparity and social economic outcome. And racism, he defines, as a policy or idea that results in racial disparity for any minority group. If you're a member of a dominant group, it doesn't matter what your individual attitudes are. You're guilty of contributing to systemic racism by association. Furthermore, to Kendi, the idea of colorblindness is a racist concept, because in his mind, it is impossible to look beyond race, and any attempt to do so can only be a guise for maintaining the racist status quo.
Check out the Ndinkra Symbols Connect the Dots drawing book series. We have 4 books in the series, all with 33 Ndinkra symbols turned into Connect the Dots puzzles. You have the name of the symbol, the phonetic spelling of the symbol, the meaning of the symbol, and the proverb attached to the symbol, because they usually have one. You can catch them all on Amazon. Enjoy, fun for the kids. Plagiarism Boot Camp is a program we've created for 8 kids, secondary school kids preferably. And basically we teach strength and conditioning, we teach boxing, fundamentals, meditation, which includes breath work and mindfulness, and nutrition. We just teach them some things that we had to learn in later life, and it would be nice if someone had told us a bit earlier. And it's a community funded program, raise money to run this and pay for this. We give them a whole bunch of kit. They all get some gloves, they all get wraps, they will get a medicine ball, exercise mat, skipping rope, and they will get a resistance band. They even get some more stuff from sponsors that have supported this boot, and it's all done in Brixton Street Gym, the original sponsor. Yeah, if anybody's interested, please get in contact, pypbootcamp@gmail.com, if you want to try and get involved in the next one, because we're going to keep running this, try and keep it a consistent program. Being anti-CRT is one of the things that garnered Trump a lot of support on his last election, right? So the far right, the right that's grown in the West is proper anti-CRT, and they like to rope it into this term called wokeism and all of this stuff. We've all seen it if we've been paying any attention. The far right is on the rise, and they are very anti-woke, and that means they're very anti-CRT, and Trump got a lot of support for being anti-CRT, right? So if we notice what's happened around the narrative of systemic racism and CRT in the global West since the murders of George Floyd and the following protests, we will see speeches like this one with Trump.
Executive order to cut federal funding for any school pushing critical race theory, transgender insanity, and inappropriate racial, sexual, or political content onto the lives of our children. Notice
what he's done there, right? He's bundled in the issues of transgender identity, inappropriate sexual or political content, and CRT. He's thrown them all into one sentence, right? You know, they are creating a narrative that means talking about systemic racism is pushing woke politics, which is another way of saying you're pushing transgender insanity and inappropriate sexual and political content. It's all one thing. If you're for part of it, you're for all of it. This is how they talk about CRT, right? And that's how they want everyone to see it, and that's how most of them see it. They're creating a narrative that means systemic racism is pushing woke politics, and anything that comes under that category is dumb, leftist, anti-American Marxism. In essence, they're demonizing CRT. This demonization through creating a narrative that associates it with all things perceived as negative works so well that many Americans are against CRT without a real understanding of what it even is, right? Check out this clip.
Do you believe schools should be teaching critical race theory?
No.
Why not?
I feel like, honestly, it brings about more racism, bringing more issues around that don't need to be.
What is critical race theory for people that don't understand it?
See, I really don't even know. I'm assuming. Can you explain it a little bit to me, honestly?
Yeah. Do you think that there should be rules about what is taught in school?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, what wouldn't you like to see taught in school?
There's critical race theory.
Yeah, that critical race theory, as soon as I heard about that, I'm like, why are we doing this?
What is critical race theory?
I don't know. I haven't.
Right.
Notice how strong feelings can be created about a thing that's not even understood purely by what it's associated with via the stories told about it, right? Guilty by association. You can decide a thing is a thing because it's associated with another thing without even knowing what the thing is in the first place, if you accept the association, right? And the stories will help you associate it with that thing, and it works so well.
The power of narrative. So I think what Trump, and I think there's probably loads of social studies being done about this now, like the power of Trump in terms of mobilizing what is ultimately a far right racist agenda, but by using kind of popular buzzwords that kind of will enrage the kind of disproportionate people, he creates a whole vibe around. I mean, the idea of woke politics being demonized and all of these kind of the transgender, all of these kind of whatever's left in liberal is grouped as one is propaganda genius. And I think, but it's also something that power structures do to
it's popularism. That's how they work. That's how they work populism. That's how you other a group. That's
those
how
two
it's
people
done.
that said, when the guy said to them, actually, like, what is critical race theory? And neither of them could even give you a cursory, basic understanding. But I've just heard that it's bad, like all them other woke things are bad, without no understanding. I think, again, the narratives we accept without critical analysis, and I think that's what most people do.
Yeah.
Like, we might not do that as individuals, that we might view ourselves as deep thinkers, but the majority of the human condition is to accept what is pushed out regularly.
I would argue we all do it to some degree. The only people, no, we all do it. It's just some are better at realizing that they're doing that, and then trying to pull it back. But we all do it. We all do it. It's just if you're aware. Notice how strong feeling can be created about a thing people don't even understand purely by what it's associated with via the stories told about. This is a powerful way people with influence use human psychology to shift views. This story is as old as time. Trump is just the newest guy to do it. Populism, this is what populism does, but that's just a new term too. It's as old as time. Every good salesman does this to a degree. Yeah, it's human psychology 101. Even in the UK, anti-CRT sentiment has political support, and the way it is framed by others in the US speak of CRT as a real threat, using terms that inspire a real sense of danger, all shaping the narrative by associating CRT with danger. Check out this clip.
And I want to speak about a dangerous trend in race relations that has come far too close to home to my life, and it is the promotion of critical race theory, an ideology that sees my blackness as victimhood and their whiteness as oppression. I want to be absolutely clear, this government stands unequivocally against critical race theory.
On a day of school, they're meant to go around the classroom. If you have white skin, you're supposed to tell them why you feel guilty about having white skin. This is in New York City, by the way. Why you feel guilty that your skin is white. I cannot comprehend that. That's incomprehensible to me, because when I was growing up, we never talked about color because we didn't see it. What they're trying to do is systematically program children to see color because they want them to eventually become activists, and they want them to hate one another. They see an opportunity in division. If you can teach them to be divided young, then you can turn them into activists and angry people that become Antifa marchers when they're older.
CRT has hijacked ethnic studies programs across the nation. CRT relentlessly focuses on only the worst moments in our history without giving due credit to the tremendous progress we've made over the last 75 years. Yes, we should teach slavery, but only in a completely truthful and age-appropriate manner. During 3 years of research for my book and doctoral degree, Critical Race Theory in Your School, How to Fight Back, I found, in the first 600 pages, I found 591 direct references to critical race theory principles. I did not see the phrase critical race theory one time, but that's one of the tricks that CRT supporters do. They remove the word CRT, but they leave the principles in and then claim there is no CRT here.
I think what's dangerous here is because if we look at CRT being part of the woke politics that's demonized in North America, for example, which is, he's got a kind of huge cultural relevance anyway. When you see a black woman from a Nigerian background kind of, we would argue, used as a kind of a screen or a puppet to kind of, I think it's more dangerous because it kind of, again, there'd be an element of the aunties that everything that Kemi Ballantyne says, they'll sit behind. So I think it's dangerous on layers, and I think it's dangerous in North America, dangerous in America, because of how powerful right-leaning Western movements are doing in the Western culture. But I think when you see a black woman saying it, for me it's more dangerous because it's got that added layer of, there'll be some of us that will see that and believe and buy into that she's got to a certain place of power, and we rate that now, and actually now she's kind of serving a different master. And I think, I just think it's dangerous when you view that, because CRT isn't just an American phenomenon, it's being touted across the West and in Europe as kind of a part of this kind of woke, anti-woke agenda. And I think that's dangerous when you see people of this hue kind of like we might see melanated people in the Conservative Party. We might say, how can you sit on those agendas? The same way we might view it, just kind of in a general way. I think it's dangerous when we see them speaking on these kind of very...
Like the blacks in America with Trump.
Yeah, like I say, man, these people, this is why I was kind of barking back against this influence that you say we have, because again, most of our celebrities, particularly in the West, are there because they are going to hold a certain line, and they wouldn't be there if they didn't hold a certain line. So I struggle to be surprised when we see the ones that are on the TV and very successful, particularly in this media field, not being exactly the kinds of people we would want to be. They're not revolutionaries. They wouldn't be there if they was anti the man, whatever you want to call it.
I'm just saying,
right?
I just think it's dangerous.
I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. I know it, but I don't think it's more dangerous than, and people might take issue with, than the rappers and whatnot. I don't think it's more, because we understand that politicians are full of crap. We all know that. We all know politicians are full of crap. So when we see a black politician, saying some stuff that's nonsense, we're not really too threatened by that, because you're a politician. I don't trust you already. But the ones that we do trust, the are the celebrities, the rappers.
Don't think for a second I'm trying to say that the type of potential soft power influence that a black politician may exert is anything similar to the type of attention or soft power that a popular rapper can. Stormzy's way more influentially powerful than a Kemi Badentop. I'm not saying that those things are linked. I'm just saying I think it's dangerous when we see these white power talking points being spoken about by people that have been towing the line way before any of these rappers. These rappers aren't viewing themselves as role models. These politicians have been towing the line to get to that point. So I think they're more dangerous because they've internalized some of these things in a way more explicit way than kind of the person that will listen to a rapper, what a rapper says. And that's a very different level type of power that our celebrities have arguably that the politicians lack a huge amount of influence in any way. But I'm saying the way in which global politics is viewed by people that are interested, I think it's dangerous when you see someone like Kemi, anybody that's melanated speaking from these perspectives, and that's the point. It's dangerous on a different level than the rapper that only speaks about death or drug culture. It's dangerous for different reasons.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, at the end of that clip there, we saw somebody he was very, very avid that it was dangerous that CRT was being taught in schools. He made an argument that the principles that are mentioned in CRT are echoed, then there's an issue. So if simply the principles are mentioned, then you're talking about CRT, right? So what are the principles of CRT? First one is socially constructed race. Race is not a biological reality, but a social category created and reinforced by society, impacting how people are treated based on racial classifications. So one of the tenets of critical race theory is that race isn't real, it's a social construct. No one can argue with that. So if he has a problem with that being mentioned, that's weird.
It's weird.
Everyone accepts that.
Arguably, right? this is how you'd want it to be taught. This is arguably how you'd want racism to be taught in an objective way.
I'm going to move. So, systemic racism. Right? Racism is not just individual acts of prejudice, but is embedded within institutions, laws, policies, creating disparities across racial groups. I think, some will argue, but there's stats. We've got stats, right? We've actually got stats that prove racism is something that has been used systemically. I can even throw a video up to kind of demonstrate that, but we know this is a thing. That. So if he's mentioning that is a problem, then blame the numbers, right? Numbers don't lie. Intersectionality. This is another tenet of CRT. Intersectionality recognizes that individuals will experience multiple forms of oppression based on race, gender, class, and other social identities, which intersect and compound in each other. It suggests if you're a working class woman who's also black, all these different layers are going to have a compounding effect, as opposed to being a middle class black man not going to experience the same level. This is just logic. I don't see why you would have a problem with recognizing that. If you recognize discrimination happens on all of these things, then why wouldn't having all these three things, that's logic again. Differential racialization. Different racial groups are racialized differently depending on social and political context, leading to varying experiences of discrimination. So this suggests, again, if you are a different racial group, like Indians experience racism and black people experience racism, but they're going to have a different experience of racism depending on the context of that society. Again, I don't see anybody arguing with that. It's a given, I would argue. I don't see the problem with that. It's just logic, right? Another tenet is interest convergence. This is social change for marginalized groups often only occurs when it aligns with the interests of the dominant group. And I'm going to show a clip of a South African lady pointing out this point.
Talk about why did apartheid end? Why did colonialism end? It didn't end because people's perspectives and behavior changed. It ended because it was expensive. It ended because white people couldn't travel anymore. It ended because they couldn't go and play sport. Because entertainment for white people was over. Therefore, they needed to bring equality. That's not, you need to be honest. You must be honest about this. So for me...
So there she basically is saying that apartheid ended because it benefited the people that instituted apartheid, which is the white population, right? It was too expensive at the time. So, you know, and I could show and I could find sources that would argue even slavery, the end of slavery didn't end because the abolitionists wanted everyone to change or the people become very religious. It was financially unstable. There was too many revolts. There was many reasons why they couldn't maintain the transatlantic slave trade, and it didn't make financial sense. So they switched the system around to help. So this could be argued. I could see people that are not for CRT debating this. But again, we got sources. We can demonstrate certain policies will be enacted when it benefits everyone, and when it only benefits the oppressed group, nothing's going to be done.
Right, it's clear that being against those, most of those of which, like academically, logically, you can't refute. Like these are, like you could argue that these kind of irrefutable truths of CRT. Now, this forming the basis of any kind of education structure that where you teach about slavery, when you talk about that nations, like the Edwardians, the Victorians, we speak about the colonial project. To not teach critical race theory in the context of all empires seems racist. I think so. So it's clear that any kind of prejudice or discrimination against CRT is inherently racist.
I wouldn't say any kind, but definitely if you try and say mentioning any of these things, because this list is not over, there is one more, but this list are the tenets of this theory. These are them. Basically, critical race theory is these things expanded upon. They just show how all of these things work and interact with each other to create the different systems and the different biases within the system. But these are the principles. They're not like
what you were saying before, though, about having those institutions, those things in place that they all work from. That's what this is.
And I think it speaks again to
these
the point of
institutions.
Sorry, not institutions.
Who writes? The perception of where race comes from. We've been very clear about what racism is. And the power structures are very uncomfortable with the victim defining the problem of racism in a way that puts more responsibility on those institutions than it does on the individual. They'd much prefer you to be racist as an individual. They'd much prefer it to be a general,
that's the bottom line.
Make it about a colour thing, because anything more than that puts a responsibility and accountability on our institutions to change, and that's long. So in that respect, I can understand any negative way that these theories or the way these theories are practiced or taught in schools or just culturally, to be against it is inherently racist. To be against it is to kind of lead back to the same power structure.
So there's one more, the voice of the colour thesis. This is the last principle. The perspectives and lived experiences of people of colour are crucial to the understanding and addressing of systemic racism. So this is to say that the people that actually experience it, their experience and their stories of how it's actually affected them are fundamental and important. They must be understood if we're going to actually address how it functions, right? Now, that's just logical as well. I don't see how you can really argue. My question is, are any of these untrue? We've just kind of gone through how they're not really untrue. So if something like systemic racism, which can be empirically proven and historically known to be a fact of US and UK history, is spoken about, it's CRT and a problem, then is it bad to speak about historical fact, right? This video on systemic racism with Roland Martin kind of demonstrates the point, and just watch just how hard this guy doesn't want to accept the fact of how systemic racism functions.
Because when African Americans were living in black neighborhoods, they also had economically depressed housing values, and the reality is they were not able
to help change it.
Are you serious? Do you even know today We've done the stories in Florida when somebody's black selling their house, the appraisers will come in and literally give them a value $100,000 to $300,000 less because they're black.
You'll take one story and say that.
Oh my God!
On how many occasions has that happened?
The New York Times literally just did a story talking about the systemic racism that exists within housing appraisals.
Out of 1,000 appraisals, how many times has that happened? Let's just say it happens.
It is a significant issue in America.
Oh my God!
I'm gonna show you how it impacts generationally. When you then get that low appraisal, you then cannot sell your house for the higher value, which then means you are not then taking those proceeds and being able to invest, being able to send your kids to school. The Federal Housing and Finance Agency released 47 million appraisal reports to the public for the first time. The appraisals, which were compiled between 2013 and 2021, present evidence of a persistent, widespread practice in the home appraisal industry to give higher values to homes when the occupants are white and devalue them if the owners are people of color.
That's such
They actually took the reports and showed the data, and now you call it analyzing the millions of appraisals by using census tracts as a proxy for neighborhoods and comparing communities with nearly identical housing stock. Two researchers found that the results showed a clear correlation. The higher the proportion of white residents in each community, the higher the appraised value of individual homes. For some reason, you're not fully accepting. What is the most consistent?
So we saw that in that clip. He's giving him numbers. He's seen the disparity and he just doesn't want to hear it. And this is something that's happened when I've had this discussion with many people. You give them facts that demonstrate racism.
I remember what this one is.
You show them facts, you show them numbers, and they still want to say it's not racism. It doesn't even happen. They just want to ignore it. They want to move on. So this is the problem with this. Even when you got facts and numbers to prove the point, people will still dispute it.
You have to have that goal in mind. You can't let nothing stop you. And even when you feel like you can't keep going, you stay consistent and keep going. 1 foot at a time, you're already farther than you ever will go. That's why they say you only need to take 1 step forward. But if you take a step forward every day and stay consistent to it, there's no telling where you will go. There's no telling what you will accomplish. There's no telling what you will gain. But first you must be dedicated to gaining it, going there, and making it that far. So I'm leaving you with two.
Again,
I think when you say history and fact, when you say historical fact, just the way that person responded shows that historical facts are interpreted, and depending on what side you're interpreting those facts from will highly determine on how you view that supposed fact.
They won't even accept it. If it doesn't allow you to believe what you believed before, you would just say it doesn't exist, it's not true, because that's all he could do at that point. There wasn't an argument against it. I'm just going to say it's BS. That is his argument. I'm just going to use the word bullshit. He couldn't come up with anything else other than I'm just going to say that's not true, even though it was just a study. Like, it wasn't made by some leftist propaganda. It was just a study, and this happens all the time. So in the following clip, CRT is explained and the term white supremacy is mentioned, which refers to the belief that white people are superior to those of other races and thus should dominate them.
As of June 2021, 22 states were planning to ban critical race theory from grade school education, with 5 already signed into law. What is critical race theory, and why do white people have such a problem with it? Critical race theory has become an umbrella term for Black studies. It's a word for making sense of and critiquing white supremacy and finding pathways to defeat it and achieve Black freedom. White people have been trying to stop CRT for a long time. This goes as far back as Frantz Fanon in the mid-20th century. Considered the grandfather of critical race theory, Fanon's book, Black Skin, White Mask, created the vocabulary for Black people to talk about living under white supremacy. Despite its powerful relevance to this day, Fanon's University rejected his work, a clear sign that Black critical thought has always caused white anxiety. More recently, Black people have had to fight for critical race theory to be legitimized in colleges. Before they became the founders of the Black Panthers, Huey Newton and Bobby Seale met by protesting their college to include Black studies as part of the curriculum. At its core, critical race theory is an essential framework that challenges white supremacy by critiquing it on all levels. We have to both learn from this knowledge and defend it as well.
Note to this views CRT in a wholly different light. Some argue that a better description of racism, as described in this CRT, is the phrase racism, white supremacy. Now, earlier I was pointing out that, you know, you got these two different people, and we were saying if you call both, if you got white racism or black racism, and if you call them both racism when two completely different things are happening, we've got a problem with the term racism, because how can it be describing two completely different realities? The phrase racism, white supremacy kind of fixes that a little bit, right? Because if you say that, then you recognize that racism, white supremacy is a thing that is trying to give help to a particular group. Do you get what I'm trying to say? And even if you say you're a black person that's practicing racism, white supremacy, it makes it clear that you're somebody that's for that exactly a particular group, and it isn't something, you can't be a reverse racism white supremacist, because that doesn't even, you can't do that, but you can attach reverse on the end of racism, and then it kind of makes sense. So that's a side note though. If the victims, so here's the question, right? If the victim of a system are defining it the way that if the victims of a system are defining the way the system oppresses them in one way, should that same system get to define it another way? We've basically said it shouldn't be able to, and I don't see why that isn't logical, but like I say, we haven't really agreed on this definition. Many of us, Kemi for example, you just spoke about, many of us actually accept this definition that the system has given us, so we are not agreed. Like on many things, we are not agreed on how to actually define this thing, racism. One of the main issues people have with critical race theory is that it suggests that all white people are racist, whether intentionally or not.
You say that all whites are racist. Can you expound on that, please?
Any white person who was born, raised, and schooled in the United States of America, if you aren't a racist, you're a miracle. Either that or you decided to educate yourself. Because education in this country is about white is right, brown's all right, black's got to stand back. Yellow's mellow, but whites, we educate in a way that says that white males have done all the adventures, have made all the adventures, have done all the discovering, have made all, everything that is good and has been accomplished according to social studies, which is actually anti-social studies, by white males. It's a lie. But we do that in order to maintain the myth of white superiority.
Jane did a really good job here. Let's talk about her point on if you're not racist, it's a miracle. If it sounds crazy to you, it's not. In the United States, we learn through a white male perspective. The history books that we read are written by white men. The media that we consume have been written by white men, is currently controlled by white men. It affects our subconscious thinking. Because Americans are forced to view the world through a white male perspective, we are consuming the white male's perspective on the truth. We're not consuming the neutral truth. Another special thing about what Jane presented here is this lack of blame. She's not blaming the average American. She's not saying, oh, hey, you're a bad person. She's simply explaining how unbelievably unlikely it would be to be American, raised in the American school system, and to not be subconsciously racist. It's just really, really, like, virtually impossible. It would be miraculous. Remember that word she used, miracle. We're raised by the white male perspective. It will still affect all of us. By acknowledging the effect, whether we're purposely racist or not, we're able to address it thoughtfully.
Okay, that white people are racist whether intentionally or not because they function as part of a racist system that has taught them to view the world in a racially biased way. And without actively trying to combat that view, it's impossible for them to not be racist. Now,
and that comes through that white privilege, isn't it, as well? They can. You could
argue this is white privilege because that's what we're saying. They're already benefited. They're in the system, and they've been conditioned to uphold the system. So because it gives them a privilege, right? Now, this kind of makes this point. This video is going to make this point. But what I want to say about that, right, is that what we have to recognize, if we accept, anybody that accepts that, many black people argue that that's not true. They know many white people that are not racist, so on and so forth,
Yeah.
right? And that's a debatable point. But for those that do accept that is the case, remember what we're saying here. We're saying that they're not racist because they hate black people, or they don't like them, or they think it's inferior, or they think they're superior. We're saying that they're racist because they are part of a society, a system that has embedded a culture of bias, white privilege, right?
Even if they don't class themselves as part of the system, they benefit from being,
and without trying to combat that system, they are going to benefit, right? So that is the implicit way they are going to be acting racist, because we're saying racism isn't a feeling, it is upholding a system, right? If we accept that, then we have to acknowledge that black people who have also been raised by this same system are also, in the same way, have these mentalities and have these ideas, because we too are upholding the same system. It doesn't, it takes two to tango to some degree. We have internalized these ideas, these views, and black people too, I would call it self-hating in this terminology. Nobody likes that term, but we have internalized these ideas, these concepts, and these views. Colorism is an example, but it goes deeper than that. There's a certain way we deal with and teach and treat each other that many people have noted in many different ways, whether you've seen it in social media or you've seen it in real life, that we deal with each other
separately,
culturally, that we don't deal with other people. I've heard it said, we know this. I don't need to go to examples.
Even having our culture being what's celebrated within the culture ultimately are negative stereotypes. So materialism, sexism, misogyny. These are the things that probably shouldn't even be called culture. The things that black culture attaches itself to, or that's looked at as even that influence we spoke about, those are things probably shouldn't be called even culture, to be fair.
That's true.
Culture should be something that protects.
It should be, but culture is just the shared views, ideas, beliefs, and behaviors of a group of people, and those are our shared views. We hold the same views that a racist white person holds because we have been subjected to the same conditioning that the racist white person has, and has led us to have these same views. Dr. Kayode Andrews again makes that point.
So whiteness is a set of ideas. It's an ideology. It's a way of going through the world.
Yeah.
The black people and brown people are just as culpable in, right? Psychosis of whiteness is not just for those with white skin at all. One of the
with this clip here, it's just a sad truth, right? My thing is, until we acknowledge that, because we like to pretend that it's not the case, it's not me, it's them. I've never done that. It's them. Every black person will say that, right? Not me, it's them. So if it's not any black person, which black people have internalized these views? Because every black person thinks they have what's his name? Vibes? Is it Vibes? Vibes the other day we mentioned, you told me the color, he doesn't allow himself to not bleach no more, right?
Bleach anymore.
He doesn't believe in bleaching no more, right?
Yeah.
And he says at the time he just said it was just for tattoos, right? And then now he's saying it was a bit of lack of love for self, right? So he's acknowledging that now.
And a cultural thing. He did say it come from the culture, innit?
It come from and he's acknowledging that now, right? I would argue that is so rare that somebody
accepts
from our would acknowledge.
He was the poster boy for it, though, wasn't he, for a while?
He was only poster because he was famous, but it's so common. It's so common, and you say poster boy about the argument that there are many black celebrities that have bleached. People have been saying this for how long? There are many I don't know. But I've heard it had said so many about different celebrities. A lot of the time I think it's even not true. Some of them say Beyonce bleached, and I was like, bro, she's been light skinned since what day? What do you mean?
She has got lighter though, but I think he was a poster because he actually advocated in his music. He actually publicly promoted the selling of cake.
So there you go. But
whereas other people, you just see them getting lighter and
and they don't say nothing.
And people just really like, hold on,
So the thing is,
unapologetically about
the thing is, that is the explicit thing. That is the thing we will talk about because you can see it. But that is like tip of the iceberg in terms of the behaviors that come from this way of thinking that we have internalized. Right? To me, this is the issue. Right? I don't really care for making other groups of people look at us and treat us different. That doesn't really change much, right? What changes everything is us looking at us and dealing with us differently. That changes everything. That changes the whole game. That's the reality. Any true revolutionary, I would argue, debate me on that, because that is the change. That everything changes tomorrow. Change how everyone else views, man, it doesn't really matter much. But that's what I would want to say on that point there. We have to recognize anybody that does have that, every white people uphold the system of white supremacy. We have to recognize they only do that because of conditioning. We have received the same conditioning. We do it too.
And I think there's spaces to have these conversations where they're constructive with people that aren't melanated, and there's ways to have the conversation that aren't. And I think
what's the constructive ways to have this discussion with people that aren't melanated? I don't get that need.
Do you know why? Because I think there's certain people that aren't melanated that are open to discussions. Like when you
why do we need them to be open? What?
It's not about need. It's not about need. I just think.
So what's the construction?
I think there's a way of these conversations, these dialogues, being constructive outside of what we need to do internally, that can have impact.
The viewpoints of the way that the other people might see.
I'm not saying there's a need at all. I'm just saying that we've got an issue. We've got an issue with the way we view ourselves. That is the first issue. What I'm saying is that there's a constructive way to have this type of discussion with.
What is that way?
Well, the first way is defining it in the way that CRT is defined. That's the first way.
I don't get it. What do you mean?
So we spoke in the first episode about how concepts or stories are perceived depends on the hunter and the hunted. So usually the victor is usually the person that tells the story.
Yes.
Now, what's powerful around CRT, however it's been put in terms of woke politics and demonized, it's a clear evidence of us defining something for ourselves. That's the power. So for me, defining racism the way we view it is a constructive way to have this discussion, because without those.
But with who? You're saying a constructive way to have it with people outside.
The way in which CRT is described is, I think, a constructive way for academics. It's a powerful academic way to have
a different discussion.
You're missing my question here. You're saying there's a constructive way for us to have these discussions with people that are not of the race, right?
Who've created these things?
Yeah.
We created these. Black people done this CRT. That's what I was saying. Is the black people made that CRT? They didn't create that. We created that CRT. That is our definition of thing. What is the constructive way of us talking to other people about our definitions
within academic?
What do we need to speak to about them in academic circles?
The whole point of the construction of CRT as an academic theory, so we can say it's powerful in the way it's practiced in communities, but actually I would argue that part of the power of defining racism the way we've defined it with CRT is powerful to take into these European institutions, not just HSBCUs, but it's powerful to bring that type of academic rigor to the discussion of race, as opposed to how I don't know, how powerful was it for eugenics? It wasn't powerful for us specifically. The power of these things academically, again, is soft power. So I'm not saying we can argue how powerful it is, but I'm saying it's powerful to have, one, defined it, and for two, to have these in academic spaces where the rigor of how it's practiced in the real world is academically looked at. That's powerful.
So what was the
We're
point
not
of
talking
it
about
then?
power.
So what was the
No,
point
when
of
we
it?
talk about race, of course we're talking about power.
No,
and my comment was
Define
about
it
power.
for what?
No, your comment was constructive. You're talking about
constructive conversation.
Yeah, a constructive conversation.
I'm saying within the world of academia, having our racism as a term, as an ideology defined by us, is powerful to have that discussion within academia. And I'd argue that without, if you say it's not powerful, us having the critical race theory as a concept that's studied in academia, I'd say that's powerful. If it's not powerful, how does it impact? How does the theory impact people in the real world? If first it's not discussed and rigored over in academic world. So all I'm saying is that there's power in that. There's a constructive way to have the conversation, which I would argue is CRT and critical race theory, and there's a not constructive way, is having conversations about bigotry or the stereotypes that are attached to these kind of racist terms. That's the difference between that's the point I'm making about how the reason why I think it's constructive and the ways in which it can be constructive. And I think this CRT as a theory, any time we define these theories ourselves, that is a powerful way to have the conversation, not just with ourselves, but with the wider world in which we have to interact with to be powerful in any kind of way.
Well, otherwise, what's the point? Because
it's not about them, it's about us.
Yeah, but then so then those points that you just made,
I'd say it's about both.
How are we working with those ourselves? How is that empowering us? How are we moving?
Because we don't agree. We don't agree.
Okay, so now that we've got these points again, how are they going to then?
I don't think any black person would disagree with that.
Yeah, and if
we don't agree though. Again, so critical race theory defines racism in a specific way.
So how is it going to be used? For what purpose?
I'm answering you, right? So critical race theory describes it in a certain way, and as I said already in discussion, black people don't agree that in this definition. Okay. Many black people will say that the slave.
And that's your point.
That's my point. We need to look at that for ourselves. We need to come to a conclusion because we agreed earlier that we don't agree on what this term refers to. Okay. Many of us do believe in reverse racism.
And then once we do that, and if we do ever get to that point, how do we move that forwards? Because I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think
to deal with.
The idea.
I can ask you. She's asking me. So
he's so petty.
Our thing isn't. We need to get away from this idea of fixing the way the system deals with us, and we need to figure out that we need to work our systems better. So until we really recognize the realities that this implies, and that means that we have to move differently. Yeah. Employing or asking or trying to force others to move differently around us is not the goal. The goal is we move differently. Right. So first it takes an informed populace. It takes us to be informed about this stuff. Okay. Because again, even my mum, like these concepts here, she doesn't want it.
But
it's all new to her.
Everyone as well.
And but the point I'm making is that the importance of this isn't to talk to other people and make them understand the importance of this. No, but I haven't finished.
I know I'm not going to change my the same view that you speak about.
But the importance isn't about my mum. I'm making an example of my mum to say that many of us don't have this understanding. Right. So the need to make another people have this understanding. What did you mean? We haven't even got this understanding. But that isn't the first step. That isn't even the second. That's not even the third.
I'll make sense of it.
I'm saying
I'm making sense by making it generational. So the example of your mum, I'm saying that's a powerful example because there are those of us, because you started off by saying until we understand some of these concepts, we shouldn't be expecting anybody else outside of our own culture to understand, which I agree to. But my point is generationally, my point that I was going to make is generationally, I know there's a certain generation above us that it doesn't matter how these are described. They might not argue with them, but they won't come away from their specific points of prejudices that they've gone.
I'm not talking about that generation.
So the point is that what I'm arguing for is that it's probably more powerful to speak to the enemy that's ready to talk than the friend who we know is not going to change.
I disagree, and this is what I'm saying is the problem. We want to talk to others.
No, it's both. I said it's both. No one's saying that we don't.
You're saying it's more powerful to speak to the enemy than to the friend.
I said no one's disagreeing that we need to internalize these truths. Like for example, critical race theory, we need to internalize that as being a more constructive way to view the racist agenda. What I'm saying is that generationally, there's parts of us who won't accept it. It's more powerful for us to be having conversations within power structures, universities, people that are going to run the country, people that are going to be running the country 20, 30, 40 years from now. It's more powerful for us to have critical race theory discussed in universities throughout all races so that there's a group understanding than it is to have the conversation with our parent generation who will never change between now and when they pass.
I disagree.
How can you argue for having a conversation with your mum is more powerful? If your mum accepts it, what change does it make in terms of regardless to how Karen's daughter or Karen's son accepts it?
I get what you're saying.
That's more powerful. I disagree. And you can't say that it's more powerful to change your mum's mind. It's not going to impact change than it is to change.
I didn't say that.
You said that it's not powerful. I'm saying that I'm showing you generationally, it's more powerful to have impact on Karen's son, or than in terms of how we're going to interact. We as a race don't act and serve in a vacuum.
Yeah, because we can't.
So the idea that we need to change internally is a true one, but to act like we don't need to also have constructive conversations with the other races that we need to interact with in a more diverse, more equal way.
I hear you.
So why disagree then?
Let me explain.
Because you
stopped me. I was explaining.
That's logic.
You stopped me. I was explaining. That's never changed nothing. No group of people has ever gotten anywhere by appealing to the views of the other groups of people. Let me finish. Let me finish. No, you are appealing. You're saying going to their universities is better.
That's what CRT done.
That's what you're saying.
That's what CRT done.
No, they was creating a framework because they're studying it. They're defining it. They are just trying to
their institutions, correct?
Bro,
Yeah.
they are
Carry on.
people in this institution.
That's the
So
power.
I'm going to define it in the terms I have skilled myself in defining it.
That's
Because
the
I am
power.
dealing with a problem.
That's the power.
And I'm going to define this problem in my way. The goal wasn't to make everybody agree with it. The goal is to define this thing. I'm just going to define it and make everything very clear.
No, I don't
Okay.
know that either. What I want to say is that you think that my point is appealing to authority. My point is not appealing to authority. My point is not denying that we need to change ourselves. My point is that it's constructive when we have these points defined academically and we're in spaces outside of selves that are gonna impact the way
I
in
keep
which
telling you, I know what you're saying. You're repeating it, but I'm saying I hear what you're saying. So let me hear my rebuttal.
how you could
So hear my rebuttal.
refuse that. That's more powerful.
So hear my,
But I said it's more powerful changing that mind than it is changing our generation. So if you're arguing a point, I'm making a point that I'm not gonna change my mum's racist views. I'm not, but I can change Karen's son's racist views, and the way we interact in the future economy may be different. I'm not saying that that's more purposeful.
I hear you, bro.
Than internal.
You're repeating. I'm hearing you. I've heard it. You said it several times. You said it several times, bro. You've not said a new thing for the last 5 minutes. You said the same thing.
No, but you set on a false premise by saying that I'm appealing to. I'm not appealing. I'm saying that it's important.
Bro, you're appealing to Karen's son.
No, I'm not appealing to Karen's son at all.
He just said he can change Karen's son's view.
So basically,
I'm
from
appealing to Karen's
this,
son. I'm first saying
you're trying to change his view,
He's
right?
not trying to change his view.
I'm saying
You just said that. What did you say?
What I'm saying again, like, what I'm saying, you're not arguing against a point that you need to argue against. All I'm saying is that there's power in us having constructive conversations when these are defined by us.
What was the point you made about Karen's son?
It's more powerful for me to change the way that his information is embedded in Karen's son than it is.
So you're changing Karen's
I'm not
son's
appealing
view,
to anything. I'm just making a point that it's more powerful to
can we
change.
agree that that's what you just
It's
said?
more
He said it, but
powerful.
what he means
It's more
is-
powerful to
What?
change
Karen's son's
son's mind
Right.
than it is powerful to change my aunt's view. It's
All
more
right,
powerful.
that's fine. I hear what you said now.
And-
Can I talk
and
now?
that's-
Can I
that's
talk?
the
Can I talk now?
only
Can I talk
point-
now? then?
that's the only
I
point
heard
that's
you.
appealing.
I heard you. I didn't get you wrong though. I
did,
said
but
that, and
I
you
was
said that
appealing.
that's not what you said.
No one's
No,
appealing.
appealing is the same thing as
authority.
trying to change their mind. If I appeal
That's not
to
the goal.
you
That's not the
to
goal.
believe
But
what
that's
I'm
not the
saying
goal. That's
now,
not the goal.
if I appeal to you to hear what I'm saying now,
No, but
it's
he's
just-
not doing it in that
If
vein.
I appeal to you to try and
Come
change
on,
what,
adjudicate him,
if I appeal to you to try and change your mind,
Which is what you're doing now.
It's me talking to you to try and change it. It's the same thing you mentioned about Karen's son, which you just said you didn't say.
What you're saying is that your goal right now is to change my mind. I'm being very clear that I'm not trying to change the purpose of the power of a constructive conversation isn't that alone. So the point, as soon as you
Look,
say,
I know what you're saying.
as
Listen,
soon
I
as
know
you
what you're
say,
saying. You're
I'm
saying it's
appealing
more
to authority,
powerful to
no
talk
one's
to them
appealing
than
to
it is to
authority.
talk to my mum.
Because no
My point
one's
is
denying
this.
that we
My
have a
point is
conversation
this.
with mum.
My
I'm not
point is
saying
this.
one's more
Listen.
important.
My
I'm saying
point
what's
is
more
this.
powerful.
My point
You
is.
can't
My
argue
point is.
against
It's
that.
not about changing Karen's son's mind. That's Karen's son's business. That's not the goal. The goal is to change my grandsons or your grandsons or my great their mind. It's not about my mum's mind. My mum's mind was just. Let me finish. It's just my mum's mind was just an example of the kind of minds that exist. I don't care about that upper generation. It's about the next generation. The focus of this is so we have a better understanding of the situation. Well, let me finish. We have an understanding of the situation we are in, not to make other people understand the situation we are in. That is the goal. Many of us, a lot of us, do not have that understanding. That is the purpose. That is the purpose. That is but that is the purpose. That is the purpose of this. This is the question before was why do we need to do this? That's what you was asking. And I'm saying that's why we did this. For our
there's ways we
I'm
do
saying
that.
for why is it, bro? I let you talk all the time, bro. That is why we needed this definition, not so other people or we could argue it or make universities, so we could comprehend really what's going on and communicate it to each other. Because a lot of us don't get that.
Right, and when you do that, and then you get 90% of us that look at it,
We
and
move
agree-
different. We move different.
So then, how do we move? We'll be moving different with
Right.
that knowledge
Yes.
behind us to be
Yes.
able to go out there within these other
move
places and
different.
work
Yes.
as a one. So you would still So he's by him saying going out there and talking to the Karen's daughter
Son.
or son
Yeah,
or whoever
yeah.
it is in a place. I know you're not totally interested. I can
I
see.
mean, it's about
but
being
it's about we
universities.
have to engage with these types of people. You're saying that we're not going to be engaging or moving
I never
globally.
said that. Here's the point. Here's the point. Here's the point. Here's
Oh
the
my
point.
God.
Here's the point. Here's the point. No group of people get anywhere by appealing to the other
not
people. Let me
appealing.
finish.
Oh my God,
By
you finished
changing
it.
the
You've said
views,
that point
whatever
5
phrase, whatever.
times
Yeah,
now.
because it's the right word. It's definitionally the right word.
So,
changing the
from your
views of the other
perspective.
people doesn't fix anything.
You made an important
Let
point.
me
You said
finish.
about
Let me finish. Let me
grandchildren.
finish. Let me
He's got a
finish.
minute.
Let me finish.
He's got a minute.
Changing the views of the other people doesn't change anything. That's not how it works. It's us changing.
Yeah, but you're saying
us
one or the other.
becoming
We're
more
not
empowered.
arguing. No one on this side is arguing against that. No one.
No, but
I
you're
agree to
saying that
everyone.
that is-
What I'm saying
that is
that
somehow
you
the
made-
goal.
You made an interesting point about grandchildren. It's not about what Karen's son thinks, it's about what our grandchildren think. My point is that it's important the way my great-great-great-grandchild interacts with Karen's great-great. It's important for that would, again, we don't, our culture isn't a vacuum. Our socially created race of many people is not a vacuum. We interact with the world, and I think it's as important to understand how that conversation is had outside. As important it is to teach ourselves internally. So I'm not denying that it's important
It's just step
and
by
that's the
steps.
goal. But within that goal, there's got to be a strategy of. That's why I think.
Okay, all right. Can you give me a practical example of any group of people that discriminated against that got any success doing it that way, as opposed to empowering themselves?
Zionism.
They empowered themselves.
Yeah, Zionism. If you look at
They empowered
if
themselves.
you look at the way Zionism was moved in Britain, I think in like the 15th century.
Go on. Yeah.
Like it was it started out as an academic movement first.
They empowered themselves.
Basically, Zionism starts in the late 1800s. This is when the first Zionist writers start.
The Jewish leaders that led Zionism were made of Western European Jews who did not at all think that their place is in Palestine. Part of them were British aristocrats, Anglo-Jewish aristocrats. Both the Anglo-Jewish aristocrats and Balfour wanted to stop the influx of poor Jews coming. So I think that's a formative period of Zionism, where Christianity, imperialism, and fresh ideas of Jewish nationalism create together this project that says, let's colonize Palestine and create not just a British state there, but also a Jewish British state.
The early Zionists were basically we can't live like this anymore. Like, we can't live with this just like waiting for the next pogrom to happen. So we're not doing this anymore, and what we need is a Jewish homeland. Now, there were lots of other Jews who disagreed with them. There were lots of Jews, in fact, at the time, the only opponents of Zionism were Jews, because they were the only ones who knew about this plan anyway. It was only a small group of people. Their enemy was Europeans. That's in the early Zionist writing. The bad guy is the Europeans who keep oppressing us. And then they're like, look, like, they basically started organizing to let's get people to go move to Palestine and start a life there. And over the years, they started to gain some influence over some really wealthy Jewish financiers to kind of back
this is in what time period?
It starts in the late 1800s, and then things started getting much worse during and particularly after the First World War. It was very in doubt who was going to win. I mean, the German military was, I think, viewed as the toughest at the time. Britain is pretty desperate at this point. They also released the Balfour Declaration, this is in 1917. This is in the middle of World War I. And they write this Balfour Declaration to the Rothschilds, who were a crazy rich, powerful banking family, and because they were Zionists. And so they write this letter, or they were pro the Zionist cause. But it was kind of like the king basically saying hey, Rothschilds, we could really use some money for this war, so here's a declaration that will support a Jewish homeland in Palestine.
What I'm saying is, it started out with an academic movement, and when I say academic movement,
what do you mean by that? Go on.
My point is that they was moving in circles of power. Now we might be able
they empowered themselves.
We might deny that a university is a place of power, but it's the same reason why I say that critical race theory being discussed in universities, and people writing essays on them, and us as many people studying it and really understand how it can be practiced, and having these discussions and debates with other races is as important as bringing that information back to the communities and trying to impart that knowledge on our children, our community. I'm saying is that I don't think it's an either or thing. I don't think it's a purpose of us to teach Karen's grandchildren. I'm not arguing for that. What I'm saying is that
it sounded like you were.
It's how you responded and how you perceived it. What I'm saying is that first we have to
to teach ourselves. But that's why it's a good example of bringing up the it's not just the elder generation. There's a certain stereotypical way that we've accepted. So we might, that same view that you mentioned about your mum, that I might mention about my aunt, will have friends of our age group that will hold on to these same stereotypical views. They're not changing. My point again, so we don't take it away from generation. We can look at people within our own social group, our own generation, that have these views that be embedded. We're not going to change their mind. We're going to change our children's mind. It's as important that we teach our grandchild how to interact in a world, as well as keeping their identity strong and rooted in reality. That's the point.
It's as important as what?
It's as important as teaching that young person that
What's as important?
It's as important to teach our descendant about themselves as it is about how they themselves interact with the wider world. Because we don't.
So teaching ourselves. That's what I'm saying is important. I'm saying every group that has dealt with any kind of oppression didn't get no.
Yeah, no, I'm not.
No, but you are, because I'm saying they didn't get nowhere by changing the minds of how they're seen. They got anywhere. Anyone that got somewhere, they got by empowering themselves.
Yeah, which is
that's how it works. And then once you have some power, then you have actual power to influence change in these institutions. It isn't going to these institutions and saying, look how the system has treated us, you need to learn about this.
No, so that's the goal.
Never said that.
No, but you're saying that this is a definition of how the system has treated us. Going to these academic institutions and making them learn about the way that the system is. Because here's the thing, these systems, let me just finish, these systems know. They know this stuff. They know this stuff. It isn't something that they need to be instructed on.
Education is
and if we really want them, and if they really want them, and if we really want them to educate us on this, it's not by asking, it's not by them being, it's going to be a powerful group. No, let me just make my point. It's about us having the power to influence them to do what we want them to do.
So again,
that's the only way that works.
It's not the only. This is my point. You're saying you're polarizing what success should be, and I'm saying to you, I don't disagree with your point. I'm just saying that part of that strategy, I'd ask you to tell me a way that CRT has been powerful outside of academic circles, because I think it's a strong concept that's been fought in the same institution, just saying they have no power. So I'm saying,
I never said the institutions have no power.
But we're saying that these should be taught, and it's the institutions that you have these constructed discourse.
You're saying they should be taught in the institutions or to the institutions?
In the institutions,
but to the students.
Of course, that's what we're saying. Should be part of it. Should be part. The CRT being a part of curriculum at university. I think it should be a part of curriculum in just kind of all the way that education is designed. But let's say, for argument's sake, that we're arguing for critical race theory being in all universities. Now, that it being in all universities means that it's going to be discussed, debated, written about, theorized by people outside of us being melanated. I'm saying there's a power in that. There's just a power in that, having that people who want to work to understand how race is really experienced by people who have defined it properly. I think that there's power for that. What it sounds like is you're saying that we shouldn't appeal to authority, and I'm not saying we should. I'm just saying that a part of the power that we wield is making these definitions and having them discussed in these fields. And I'm not sure why you'd argue against it.
But what I'm saying is not constructive, because all that happens is it's debate.
Okay, that's a different perspective.
Yeah, let me finish my perspective. It just gets debated. What happens
CRT,
is
what
happens. No, let me finish, bro. I let you finish every time. It just gets debated. What happens is it just gets debated, right? And what happens is it's nothing like anti-Semitic example, for example.
No, of course not.
Let me finish, bro. It just gets debated whereas it doesn't need to be. We understand it. If we teach it to each other, we understand it. We know that's how it functions. Part of understanding how it functions is to know you're only going to deal with roadblocks to this understanding being accepted in certain institutions. So rather than wasting our energy trying to debate the realities of this, because you could just have this professor saying this, like I've shown you with these clips, this debating the reality of our lived experience.
We now have a generation that believes everything we did by colonizing. Yes, it is true. They think everything about colonization was wrong. It wasn't. There were some terrible things, and there were some good things to come out of it. And that is about properly acknowledging your past.
Education.
Yes, completely.
Sanitation.
Transportation.
There was so much that we brought to communities. But that is. But
But you see, you're typical of what we're talking about.
No, I'm saying that colonization, the empire was wrong. It was wrong, full stop. That's, the things that Britain might have done.
But that's very much through your modern
compensate for
sensibilities,
it.
you might say that, because we wouldn't now routinely go into other countries.
It was a profoundly racist set of basically invasions of other people, where we subjugated people to our rule and have made them work for us. It was
made their countries work.
But imagine yourself in the shoes of a 13-year-old boy hearing you say that.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. What do they then? How do they then carry that through life?
Well,
in terms of who I am as a Brit.
But it's not about.
We had racist ancestors. Say it,
but Bev.
But I'm saying that we hear much more of that than we do about the benefits of that period of time.
Well, because I don't think there were benefits. I think that we have to be completely.
Of course there were.
I don't think there were.
There were benefits to us.
A lot of those countries did not, Jonathan, those countries,
it absolutely does.
Those countries did not have money. They did not have the creativity. They did not have people in positions of power
of course they
to
had
do this.
creativity
No,
in
they
those
didn't.
countries. They just didn't live like Britain did. It doesn't make it worse. It just makes it different.
So it's okay to live without education, and it's okay to live without a transportation system, is it?
They did have education. It just wasn't our education system. They had language. It wasn't our language.
This cultural
medicine we brought to
precisely what we have.
Yes. I don't know. Look, I don't know why we're even.
Why do we need to debate it? What we need to do is understand what our lived experience is, which this allows us to do, and then behave in a way that understands this is how things are going to function, which would allow us to empower ourselves, which will allow us to gain power, which will allow us to enforce our will, which is how it is done. This is how it's done. So we move.
Which needs to be taught.
We move. But making them teach the thing doesn't fix the problem.
CRT
all right, so
is a good example of us teaching.
So this power, the power I say is true power. The power to influence the minds, eyes of the masses is literally to literally mold entire nations' views, which directly leads to the power dynamics between the races and therefore the individuals in those races. Right. This is the true power. And this video by Professor Cambon describes the different levels of power. He's a G. I do like this definition of how power functions.
Again, you have these different levels of power. There's a good book, Blueprint for Black Power, that goes into this, that the lowest level is force. And oftentimes when you speak about this, they'll say, well, white people don't force you to do this. No one's forcing you to wear that. No one's forcing. And, it's very, if they actually understood what they're saying, that's very appropriate, because force is the lowest level of power. That's colonialism, where they'll actually, put a gun to your head, shoot you, and now they'll conscript you into World War I or World War II. I call it White War I and White War II. That's force. They're literally forcing you to go into the mines and go to the farms, to enrich them. But at our next highest level is coercion. So now they don't have to use force, because as soon as you use force, now the people are going to fight back. But coercion is a threat of force. They'll put everybody, line you up. All right, now you have to go get on this boat. Otherwise, your whole village will be destroyed. All right, that's now coercion. But now above that, now you have influence. So now what I'll just do is go to your ohene or your mahene and then tell him, all right, this is what we need you to do. Bring us 10,000 soldiers, so forth and so on. Otherwise, you'll be destooled, you'll be put on the seashells, blah, blah, whatever it is, right? So now they're using influence over somebody who now has power over other people on different levels. And then you have competent and legitimate authority. This is where now they can get someone to say, oh, well, I'm loyal to the queen or I'm loyal to the king, because they have competent authority, they have legitimate authority, they're the head of the Anglican, faith, they're this, they're that. So now once they can give you certain titles and so forth, now each higher level of power is able to engender less resistance, right? Force is the most resistance, that's why it's the lowest level. But now competent, I think you should be the leader. Oh, we should listen to you because you're the rightful person. Oh, you have a PhD, or you have this, or you have that. That's now competent and legitimate authority. But the highest level is manipulation. And manipulation doesn't engender any resistance whatsoever, because you think that you're thinking for yourself. So the guy who's marrying a white woman, he doesn't know that the movie that he saw when he was 3 years old
It's having an effect.
And the TV show that he saw when he was 4, and the action figure that he got when he was 5, and the social media he was looking at last week, and what came up on his news feed 2 days ago. He doesn't understand
the power to create a socially accepted narrative that, even if not actually true, still has the ability to decide how the society functions. In other words, the power to create the approved truth that everyone else lives by. The term explained by Professor Bayena Bello, great sister.
When you take the New York Times to read, you think you're getting information? No. You are reading approved truth. Truth approved for general consumption. That's what you're getting. Has nothing to do with truth. It has nothing to do with reality.
The approved truth about a definition of racism and CRT are heavily debated because it is about the power to define a society as just or unjust, moral or immoral, as fundamentally and at its core racist or fundamentally fair society with a few racist individuals in it. Pointed out by this vid by Jeffrey Sachs at the Democracy Forum.
It was a slave-owning, genocidal country. When I look at my own country, the United States, it is a semi-democratic, white-dominated, hierarchical, racist society that aims to preserve privilege by the elites. That's how it was formed in 1787. It was a slave-owning, genocidal country, killing Native Americans for a white culture. But amazingly, it still looks that way, although we're much more diverse now than we were. The most violent country in the world in the 19th century, by far, was perhaps the most democratic or second most democratic, and that was Britain. You can be democratic at home and ruthlessly imperial abroad. The most violent country in the world since 1950 has been the United States. It's been by far involved
Jeffrey,
in more
stop
women
now.
and more wars.
Jeffrey, I'm your moderator, and it's enough.
If we see it like that, then we can understand why people are threatened by which truth is approved, because people want to believe their nation is fundamentally morally correct as opposed to fundamentally morally deprived. So Chappelle makes this point about another approved truth, and it makes me laugh, but it's true.
It's a rule, the rules of perception. If they're black, then it's a gang. If they're Italian, it's a mob. But if they're Jewish, it's a coincidence, and you should never speak about it.